So last Wednesday, I was supposed to send my slides to Xander, and I thought that would be a good day to begin to write my talk. And I know, I'm that person. So I had like lots of ideas and things that I was thinking about that I wanted to kind of share with this community this time. And I sat down, I got my tea out, I turned like my focus station on Spotify, and I got all ready to like do some deep work. And I was typing furiously and sort of just letting these ideas flow. And after like about 15 minutes, as one does when one is working on something really important under a timeline, I found myself on Twitter. But it actually was very fortuitous because I came across this article. Brain scans of founders show they love their companies like children. And I was like, oh, I'm intrigued. This is like kind of one of the themes that I wanted to talk about. So I read the little write-up, and then I went to the original journal because science is good. And these researchers are basically asking the question, do founders love their companies? And does that love look neurologically similar to the kind of love that parents have for their children? So the way that they went out to, or set about assessing this question is to get two groups of men who had companies, men who had children. There were no women in this study because we still have work to do. I'll leave that there. So one of the ways that they do these brain scans, they use a functional MRI, so they could see the activity of the brain when the brain was cued with certain stimuli. So they showed the group of fathers images of their children, their specific children. Then they showed him a neutral stimuli. Then they showed him a picture of like another kid that was sort of similar but not their child. So they're looking to see how the brain makes the distinction between these different stimuli. And then they did the same thing with companies. So they used the logo of the company or a picture of the staff, some image that was highly associated with the company. Then they did a neutral stimuli, and then they did the logo of another company that wasn't a competitor but was sort of similar. So they're looking to see how the brain reacts to one's own child/company or a similar but neutral child/company. And it turns out that the brains of parents and the brains of founders look very similar. And one of the parts of the brain that was most activated when founders were looking at their companies and parents were looking at their children is the reward center of the brain, the striatum. Specifically, if you care about this, the nucleus accumbens, the caudate nucleus, and the putamen. And these are midbrain centers that are activated when the brain experiences of reward. So a primary reward, like food, you're hungry, you eat food, this part of the brain's like, yay! You are needing money, a secondary reinforcer, you get money, this part of the brain has a little party. So this is the part of the brain that's activated. It produces a lot of dopamine, which if you're into neuroscience is one of the neurotransmitters that helps us feel blissful, feel good. So, Rob said yesterday that your company is not your baby, but your brain thinks it is. Because the brains of founders and the brains of parents looked identical in this way. So we really do have a neurological basis for the fact that founders, you do love your companies deeply, and it's like rewarding and blissful. This part of the brain that's the striatum is also really active when we talk about parental love and romantic love, things that feel good. Another interesting finding that these researchers reported is a suppression in the posterior cingulate cortex, the temporoparietal junction, and the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex. And these are all parts of the brain that are active in social understanding and assessment. So when you are trying to get in the mind of someone else and try to figure out, like, what's their game? Are they trustworthy? Are they going to be interesting to talk to? When you're mentalizing, we call it, your brain is trying to project into someone else's brain. This part of the brain shuts down when we think about children, when we think about our companies. Essentially, this is a suspension of critical assessment. And the researchers thought that this may be happening because the company, like the child, is not encoded as a separate entity. The brain doesn't recognize it as a separate thing. It sees it as an extension of the self. So love is blind, and we can't necessarily recognize, according to the brain, where we end and the company begins. So to summarize their research, I can't actually see this very well. They said entrepreneurs in love rely on their subjective beliefs that are represented in an inside view, which perceives the details of one's own company as unique, special snowflake, and they tend to ignore or underweigh objective information that may undermine their beliefs. So you're very, very biased towards your own company, folks. And what this means is that as in an interpersonal relationship, the perceived need to rely on external data to validate the qualities of one's own venture is reduced. So we have this interesting combination of love, of subjective bliss, and a decreased capacity to critically assess. Nothing bad has ever happened when those two things are going on together. So I have a couple reactions to this article. I really did find it interesting, and I kind of immersed myself in it. A little parenthetical aside, and then I'll get back to my thoughts, but because of the way that this particular article is written, and because of what's happening in my life, I realized throughout the course of this talk, I'm sort of talking a lot about parenting and using a lot of examples of parenting from my own experience. So I just want to say, there are lots and lots of ways to live life. I in no way mean to sort of project that as the expected standard of how people's lives go. It's just sort of the material I have to work with, and also the material that was kind of represented in this article. So, getting back to how I think about this, first of all, for me, this study really explained some things. Because I don't know how you all are, but for me, when I became a parent, I realized both the heights and depths of myself, like how incredibly patient and kind and loving and sleep-deprived I can be. And also, what a selfish, short-tempered, crazy person I can be. So if you have a company and you kind of feel the same, you're both impressed by your own ability to stick to it and work 15-hour days and drive hard, but you're also a little bit crazy and obsessed and irrational, that probably means you're doing it right. All the right brain centers are activated for you. The other reaction, or the second reaction I had to reading this article is this is great. Work is so important. The way that we spend our days, day in and day out for years, if we can find something that we love that makes our brain gushy and mushy and happy and in love, damn it, go and do that. That is a great way to live. How cool that founders feel that way about their work. How cool that it brings that much pleasure and satisfaction. So much so that you don't even care about the data. My third reaction, of course, because I always have to bring the downer to MicroConf, is that this is probably kind of dangerous. To have this level of fusion, of a lack of separation between oneself and one's company, I'm going to argue is dangerous. I would say the same thing about a relationship. Fusion between two people in a romantic relationship can be dangerous. You lose yourself. Fusion between parent and child can be dangerous. Are you your company? Do you want to be your company? Do you want to be that entwined? One of the experiences that sort of led me to believe that this might be a bad thing is, again, I'm going to draw from my experience as a parent. You saw one of our sons in the video yesterday, and this child, how to say it, he is still developing the adaptive capacity to thrive in a classroom environment, which means he gets in trouble a lot. Like, not for bad things. He's not malicious. He's a really lovely child. But he just quite can't sit in a chair at the right times for the right amount of time, blah, blah, blah. So I never got in trouble, ever. So if I was going to the principal's office, it was because I was getting an award. And so, yes, I'm that kid. So here I am, though, now, as an adult person, and my little person, who I'm so connected to, is getting in trouble. And when this entered our life, when this began to happen, I would feel all of this like shame and fear and sadness. Like I was the 9-year-old in the principal's office. I had all of the emotions that I sort of projected onto him. And that was really a problem because I would like start shaking and feel really anxious when I was going to the school, which is really not healthy and super not helpful to my kid who needs me to be a fucking grown-up. He doesn't need me to feel like a 9-year-old and have all the same feelings that he maybe should feel. He needs me to pay attention to what he needs and to use my ability to critically assess a situation and provide him with the support or the advocacy or the bust his chops, whatever is appropriate in that moment. That's what's required of me. And so it goes with founders. If you are so fused with your company that you feel all of the ups and downs of what it feels, that you are immersed in all of the moments of the life of the company, it creates a weak you and a weak company. Because your company needs you to be an adult with a brain, not to ride up and down the emotional roller coaster that the company is experiencing. Part of our transition in the last year has been, as you heard, to move to Minneapolis. And so what that has meant for me is doing less traditional academic and psychology work, and I'm working a lot more with you all, with founders. And one of the things that I've begun to practice pretty regularly when I'm coaching or consulting with founders is to try to listen for the different voices of the company and the voices of the human. Because often someone will be telling me about a transition that they're going through, that they're burnt out, that they're frustrated, they're having this problem with a teammate. And I realize that the voices and the motivations are sort of all mixed together, but there is a place where the needs and the wants of the company start, and the needs and the wants of the founder or the person stop. There's separateness. So part of what I try to do is listen for the difference. So a couple little quick examples. Here's a little baby founder, a baby company, and this company wants to grow. He wants to take over the world. He wants to take over Tokyo. He is just sort of ravenous for growth. That's the motivation of the company. The founder, however, maybe wants to take a more conservative approach, or wants to be more strategic, wants to manage growth in a sustainable way, or wants to emphasize profit over growth. There are different motivations present, and the company may be driving one motivation while the founder, the human, has a different set of needs. Little company babies are also kind of emotional. They tantrum. They go up and down. They are swayed by Google settings, what's happening in Amazon, lots and lots of things that are outside of the founder's need to experience stability, love, comfort, a sense of worth. The company needs to be able to be erratic. It needs to be able to be kind of a toddler without the founder going along with it, without the founder experiencing all of the same ups and downs that the company does. Another example, sometimes the business wants all the customers. It's sort of like nom nom nom, like, I'll take everybody. But sometimes the founder, wants to be much more selective about who they work with. Maybe they have a lot of anxiety about a high-drama customer, and there's a value for the human. There's a human need or a human push to be more selective. So the company and the founder, once again, have these sort of contradicting needs and wants. I think the point here is don't lose the ability to see, to hear, to understand yourself as distinct from your company. It doesn't mean you don't love it, but sometimes your company needs your separateness. And I want to point out, I'm giving this talk to you because we're at Growth. My talk at Starter is all about how to survive fusion. It's all about how to survive the infant years when your company can't hold its head up or feed itself or do anything by itself. But we're at Growth. You all are farther along in the process, ostensibly, and your job is to develop or grow a company that is maturing well, that is working towards self-sustainability in some capacity, is working towards some autonomy. What we don't want, or what I wouldn't want for your life, is to have like a spoiled brat company that will just take, wine, all the time, without maturing well. And I'm being a little playful. I've got pictures of cute kids. But the thing is, guys, the risks are really real. There is a psychological price to all of this. And you've built something that you love, which is fabulous. But building something that you love takes tremendous sacrifice. And I don't want that sacrifice to be you. Not really. Not your self, not your identity, not your soul. So whether or not you've kind of personally experienced, there's a darkness to all of this. Entrepreneurs are tremendously lonely people. There's a lot of anxiety, there's depression, there's angst, there's substance abuse. You alone bear the weight of the business you've created. You alone bear the weight of the life that you've made. So, how do you do this well? How do you build a business but also cultivate a self that is separate enough, that is robust enough, that is strong enough? Bad things are happening. This is hard work. This sense of knowing yourself, of being self-reflective, of having, that was fast, good job, guys. Having a deep capacity. It takes intention and effort to do this well. For all of us, it takes intention and effort to be a good person. It takes intention and effort to be a mature, wise person. It takes intention and effort to be successful. And it takes intention and effort to have the guts to sort of look inside yourself, know who you are, and be true to that version of yourself as you go through life and all of the sort of pressures and things that will threaten to pull you in all these different directions. So one of the ways that I think about identity is it's a culmination of who you are in all of your domains and in all of your moments. So your identity is comprised of the past you, the present you, and the future you. So when we think about the past, some of you may have heard me say this before, but when I became a psychologist, I think I probably said out loud, I'm going to be the psychologist that's like really down to business, like really about effective behavioral change. I'm not going to be talking to people about their mothers. And then I started doing this work, and I sort of realized that you can't do a lot of behavioral change unless you like talk to people about their mothers. Not that mothers matter so much, although they really do, but who you were as a kid matters a lot to who you are. And your understanding of your adult self is based very heavily on how you came up in this world. So I'd like to thank Allie Tabor for the little picture of cute Mikey, and we've got cute Robbie. Don't let your wives friend me on Facebook. So, real quickly, just turn to someone around you and try to remember, what did you love when you were 6? What were you into? Matchbox cars, Rainbow Bright, Lego. What'd you love? What was fun for you? No, really, talk to each other for a second. Okay, come back. It's kind of a fun question, isn't it? Any similarities? Were you any D&D players in the room? Anna, I see you. I love talking to founders about this, actually. I think maybe 2 years ago, Rob and I did a series on the Zen Founder podcast about founder origin stories, and we talked to founders about their growing up time, their experiences as kids. And so Heaton Shaw was one of the people that we interviewed, and when he was a kid, he would spend his evenings in the hospital with his dad. His dad was a doctor. So while his dad was finishing notes or whatever, Heaton would be there. And with a screwdriver, was taking apart the hospital's computers and then hopefully putting them back together. Erica Douglas, another founder that we interviewed, was collecting golf balls from the golf, what do they call that? Golf course behind her house, and then selling them back to golfers for 25 cents each. Entrepreneurial venture. Patrick, I don't know, is he in here? Patrick loved video games, Patrick McKenzie, Patio 11. But he didn't have a computer or a way to code them, so he checked out a book at the library about how to code video games, and he would write code by hand, sort of imagining in his head how the game would go based on the code he was writing. And Rob Walling was coding on an Apple IIe and was applying for patents, and as a child was, of course, collecting, writing, and trying to publish comic books. So we know where that whole thing came from. I think the thing is that we come into the world in a certain way. And we bring this true self, this sort of essential self, into the world, and it gets sort of battered around and reshaped by teachers and parents and siblings and first heartbreaks and first girlfriends and first husbands. And it's really hard to retain the essence of that unless we work really hard at it. We have to develop this way to play society's games. And, it's good. We all are grown-ups in the world, and we have things to do and bills to pay and all that stuff. But it's so easy to lose that essential self. And I think especially there's a lot of pressure for there to be a lot of space between our grown-up selves and our child selves. We're supposed to be mature and responsible and not waste time and not mess around. But I also think that there's a lot of wisdom to understanding that essential self and how he or she shapes us in this moment. So when you were a kid, if you would hop from one activity to another, you sort of make one Lego thing, and you move to another Lego thing, and you move to another Lego thing, hey, maybe you're a serial entrepreneur. Maybe you're not going to be content working on one project for years and years. On the other hand, if you spent a whole summer doing this really detailed model train situation, and you loved it, and you never got bored with it, and you just wanted to build and build and grow, maybe you're not a serial entrepreneur. Maybe you love to see a thing through the whole way for a long time. If you were orchestrating, if you were the foreman of your neighborhood kid crew, and you were making the plans and designing the games, maybe you have sort of CEO naturally written within you, and you're great at leading teams. If you spent most of your time maybe quietly in the library, it doesn't mean that you're not great at leading teams, but it means that you have a different skill set that you're bringing to that work, and maybe some relative weaknesses that you need to work on cultivating. Or if, like this child, you send an email to your parents who are in the next room, all caps, subject line, urgent, exclamation, 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 issue at the office, exclamation, exclamation, read now, 8 more exclamation marks. Hey, I just sang One Call Away on Sing Karaoke. I think this kid has a future in email marketing. Yeah, he just is who he is. The other piece is sort of understanding what you overcame to get here. Not only knowing your points of joy and bliss, but also knowing your toughness. What you have had to put up with or conquer. Not everyone had like a blissful, delightful childhood, right? We had things that we had to work through and push through and fight against. And again, many founders who I've talked to have hard things in their stories. The loss of a parent, a significant mental or physical illness, some kind of traumatic event. And it's those moments, just as well as our joyful moments, that tell us sort of what we're made of and who we are, and what superpowers we might be bringing to this work because of the things that we've had to cultivate within ourselves as we've gone through our lives. I think the question for me is, what parts of you are non-negotiable? Your past self is your best teacher about that. What parts of you do you not want to lose? What parts of you are essential? It's MicroConf, so I will give you some actionable strategies. If you want to be more acquainted with your past self, very simply, practice memory. Tell stories about your childhood antics to your family, to your friends. Read your old journals, look at old pictures, talk to your parents, talk to people who knew you when you were a kid. Don't lose your past. Don't lose the anchoring that you have in your own history. But you have to be intentional and effortful. It doesn't happen automatically. Practice play. I could do a whole talk about the mental health benefits of play. Play, just doing something for the fun of it. It doesn't necessarily have to push forward the bottom line. It just brings you joy. It just feels good. That helps you reconnect again to that childhood self that holds a lot of wisdom and holds a lot of sort of information about what you really, truly love. And relatedly, I would say practice joy. There's this interview going around the internet right now of Brené Brown talking to Oprah, like the two soul mamas of the world right now. And Brené Brown talks about how joy is one of our most terrifying emotions. It actually makes us feel very vulnerable and uncomfortable because all of the barriers are stripped away, all the walls. You're just like, here I am, I'm joyful. But that can feel very out of control to these big grown-up brains. It can feel very out of control when we feel also the pressure of adulting. But if you give yourself some moments in your life where you just get to be joyful, not protected, not anticipating the next tragedy, not making a plan, not trying to problem solve, but just immersed in a positive emotion, it's really good for your brain, and it might also be fun. So this business of becoming, of being in touch with our sort of historical selves, is becoming belongs to the heights. It's full of torment. It's full of all of our hard things. But how can you become if you never are, if you never pay attention to all that you've been through and done? So you need your bottommost. You need your low points. But you also need your heights, because that's sort of where you soar from. So let's time travel a little bit more. That's the past self. When we think about our present selves, how do we distinguish our present selves from the crappy customer that tweets an out-of-context half-truth about your product, or a slow database, or a server outage, or a contractor that went AWOL, or the guy on your team that brought the site down, or the sales slowdown? Those are all of the things that you do in a day. Those are the problems that you tackle with that company of yours. Those are the company's problems. That's the company. But you, how do you know in a given moment who is you, your present self? I think your present self exists in the effort that you bring to each day. Not necessarily the tasks that you're doing, but the heart that you show. Your choices to be kind or ethical, all of the decisions that you make that are not about what's happening, but about being, about who you are in that moment. Your present self, it's your creativity, it's your mind, it's your intelligence, it's your heart, it's your body, anything that's contained in your skin. That's who you are in this present moment. Again, separate from the tasks that you do. You aren't your Twitter feed. You aren't what people see on social media. You aren't what you project as the leader of a company to the world. That's part of your job. It's part of your company. It's not you. Staying connected to your present self. How do you do that? How do you not get caught up in the whirlwind of all of the ups and downs of this toddler tantruming company that you love? One of the strategies is to practice detachment. Just like parents take some time away from their kids every now and then. So it can be good to have systems where you do detach. You allow yourself a break, a time to reset your brain, a time to rest, space between the company that you love and your separate self. Another strategy is to be known. To really be known by other people so that they will help you to see your blind spots. They will help you to see where you have shut down critical assessment and you are no longer paying attention to who you are in a given moment. And it's also in relationships that we kind of bring forth our best selves. So be known, invest in your relationships, have a mastermind, have a community of founders that you are actually honest with. That will help anchor you in your present self. Let's do a little more time traveling. Lots of interesting research happening right now within the field of psychology and mental health about people's capacity to conceptualize their future self. So we've done past, present, and here we go with future. And it's sort of this mental health superpower, actually. If you can really actively practice that mentalization skill that I talked about and get yourself not into the brain or intentions of another person, but into the brain or intentions of yourself 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, Lord willing, that ability is associated with better self-control, increased self-compassion, better decision-making, a sense of trust, a deeper sense of trust in yourself, your ability to delay gratification, and voila, critical assessment, your ability to use your brain to evaluate, a critical question. Because right now, in this moment, we only see what we feel, right? We see, oh, that cake looks good. I don't really feel like going for a run today. I don't really want to call my mother. She's kind of a pain. We see our instantaneous, momentary emotional pressures. But when we forecast out and we ask the question, what will it mean if I continue in these patterns for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? We're opening kind of a whole other capacity to assess our decisions right now because we're projecting them into the future. And this is becoming a thing where people have conversations on the internet with an image of themselves having aged a certain number of years into the future. And it's a skill. How do you talk to your future self? Do you talk to your future self? Do you sort of sit down and think like, what will my future self want me to do about this decision right now? Do you write to your future self? Do you let your future self write to you? I know this all sounds like a little bit, but I promise it's actually very effective. Letting yourself play with time. Because the fact is that who you are in this very moment is only one piece of your story. And if you can have a longitudinal view of yourself over the course of your life, you'll be that much better at making decisions and being a well, happy person. Identity is a culmination of all of it. The past, the present, the future. And fusion is the path of least resistance. Just letting yourself be sort of taken in or taken up with identifying with your company is easiest. It's easy to stay in that infant phase. It's not easy, but it is. You know what I mean? it's much harder to do the work to mature your company and to mature yourself. Identity takes work. There's this drift towards the path of least resistance, a drift toward fusion that we all experience. This is my dad. His name is Tim. And in February, he was diagnosed with stage 4 inoperable metastatic esophageal cancer, like the nasty one. And it spread to his lungs, and it spread to his lymph nodes, and it's sort of on this tour throughout his body. And they can't operate, and they probably won't be able to use radiation. So he started chemotherapy, and people are like, oh, how long will we be on chemo? And it's forever, until he dies. And, this is a scary one. There's less than a 5% chance that he'll live more than 5 years. So our whole family has had this abrupt reassessment of what we're doing, of what's important, of how we're spending our time, because there's just nothing like a near-death experience or knowing that someone you love has very limited time to help you reassess how you are spending the moments of your days. And I know this is a story that many of you know. You've lost parents, some of you have lost spouses, some of you have cancer and are in the middle of this drama or this journey yourselves. And I don't say it to pull the sympathy cord, as much as it has kind of been this stand up straight and really pay attention to how life is going. And one of the things that I've actually been quite surprised at for myself is this kind of renewed drive to really live in my own best life. And one of the things that my experience with my dad has really kind of made come alive in me is that I really love my work. I love my family, yes, but I also love my work. And that's a good thing. It doesn't have to be these sort of contradictory, counterbalancing, I can't love my family and both love my work. There's some time and space for everything that really matters. And for me, one of those things is my work. And I think that's, at least what the brain scans show about all of you too. The whole point of this really is that a founder who's killing it is a founder who's awake, who is paying attention, who is engaged in as much critical assessment and intentional, active self-development as possible. That you're not just letting yourself get absorbed with the tasks of the day. Don't lose yourself. Don't raise a spoiled brat company who will just take. Help it to grow up. Let yourself be a full self. Because I think, the whole thing with my dad and all this stuff, this is not a dress rehearsal, guys. This is it. So if you are unhappy with how your life is going right now, you better have a conversation with who you're going to be in 20 years and ask him or her what you should be doing. Or have a conversation with who you were 20 years ago and say, hey, kiddo, what did you love? What was fun? Who am I really? Where should I be giving my attention? Love your company. But don't let it take you over. We began with neuroscience. I think we should end with poetry. This is Pablo Neruda. You start dying slowly if you do not travel, if you do not read, if you do not listen to the sounds of your life, if you do not appreciate yourself. You start dying slowly when you kill your self-esteem, when you do not let others help you. You start dying slowly if you become a slave of your habits, walking every day on the same paths, if you do not change your routine, if you do not wear different colors, if you do not speak to those you don't know. You start dying slowly if you avoid to feel passion and turbulent emotions, those which make your eyes glisten and your heart beat fast. You start dying slowly if you do not change your life when you are not satisfied with your job or with your love, if you do not risk what is safe for the uncertain, if you do not go after a dream, if you do not allow yourself at least once in your lifetime to run away from sensible advice. You start dying slowly when you let yourself stop being awake. There we go.
So Rob, she spoke about visualization and things like that. Did you visualize your position right now 5 years ago? Is this what you visualized?
You mean selling drip?
Yes, like the path you're on right now.
I didn't. I wasn't. I didn't build drip to sell it, so I wouldn't have thought that. But I did have a simple note document. We were talking one night on an anniversary, and I wrote that I wanted to sell a company at some point for X price, or make this much money per year from it. So, but it had nothing to do.
The X price was named.
It was the exact dollar
like 5
amount
years
that
ago.
the drip sold for, yeah. But it wasn't about drip. So I don't know that I guess the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah.
Next. on second.
I'll answer it, yes.
Yeah. Other questions? No.
So at the moment, you've probably noticed on the internet that Stoicism is all the rage. It's come back after a few thousand years in the darkness. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on Stoicism for entrepreneurs?
That's a tough one. So if we understand the premise of Stoicism is a certain level of detachment from emotional experience, and I can fully be misrepresenting this. So if someone here is like a Stoic fan, feel free to define this better. I am of two minds about this, and I think you can sort of hear that in my talk in a way. I'm a big fan of emotion. I think that's one of the really fun ways that our sort of mind, body, soul is all mixed up together. That we have the capacity for passion and being thrown a little bit off kilter in one direction or another. So I want to retain that kind of important human capacity, but I also like the capacity to step outside of what's happening in sort of the mucky muck of our lives or what's happening within our own selves, and objectively from some distance observe. So, yes, and.
This one might be a little too in-depth, but when a founder is in the shit, they are in all those panic situations. It's going up, it's going down. Their emotions are torn everywhere. How do they separate themselves from those situations?
Take deep breaths. Well, that is the shifting that we all have to do in some ways. Like, you're shifting from one way of being to another way of being. And, people talk about work-life balance, and I no longer find that to be a helpful term. I find that I'm just sort of throwing myself into whatever that moment is. So when I talk about detachment, I'm not necessarily talking about let's be in blank space, but let's then choose to attach to something else. So whatever craziness is going on, whatever sort of emotionally fueled anxiety, panic is happening between you and your business, it's okay to shift and detach for a time and attach to something else. Attach to your bike ride on the way home, or attach to that meal with your kid, or to shift and then go back to it. It's sort of like putting a pause in it, not fully walking away.
Okay.
I think we have time for one or two more.
I was just going to make, first of all, I just want to say, great talk. I agree with everything that you said, 100%. I think this is very critical that to talk about these subjects. I just want to just make one comment about the Stoicism. I think that it's often represented as being emotionally detached. And I always remind myself this phrase, which is, feel the pain, keep stepping forward. And so, because I think you can stonewall, and you can get to the point where you can push forward, but you don't actually feel the emotions. And you think that that's strength, but that's not strength. True strength is feeling all the emotion, but still stepping forward so that you actually experience life instead of just plow through.
Yeah. So I'm more of an existentialist than a Stoic. And existentialists sort of are very ballsy about, like, death is happening, the world is terrible, but I'm going to face it and not be afraid. So it's a little of the same idea. Like, I'm not going to fear the feelings. I'm going to know within myself, and this is sort of the capacity that I want to develop in the people that I work with. I'm going to know within myself that it's actually all survivable until it's not. Like, until your heart's no longer beating, and then it's not. But it's survivable up until that point.
We have any last question? Thank you, Sherry.